If you have a Bible, turn to Mark chapter 1. And while you're doing that, a few weeks ago I gave 7 reasons why people should attend church. And the 7th one was the fact that it may prolong your life here on earth by regular church attendance. Yes. I want to just read a few things that Dr. Koenig says about that in his book, The Healing Power of Faith. It says, among other things, people who attend church regularly, pray individually, and read the Bible significantly have lower diastolic blood pressure than the less religious. Those with the lowest blood pressure both attend church and pray or study the Bible often. People who attend church regularly are hospitalized much less often than others who don't. People with strong religious faith are less likely to suffer depression from stressful life events, and if they do, they are more likely to recover from depression than those who are less religious. The deeper a person's religious faith, the less likely he or she is to be crippled by depression during and after hospitalization for physical illness. Religious people have healthier lifestyles. Elderly people with a deep personal intrinsic religious faith have a stronger sense of well-being and life satisfaction than the less religious. Yeah. This may be due in part to more stable marriages and strong families religious people tend to build. People with strong faith who suffer from physical illness have significantly better health outcomes than less religious people. Those who attend religious services regularly have stronger immune systems than their less religious counterparts. Religious people live longer. A growing body of research shows that religious people are both physically healthier into later life and live longer than their non-religious counterparts. In fact, studies have shown that on the average, people who attend church regularly live about 7 to 10 years longer on average than those who don't. But the catch is, you've got to do it regularly. People who attend church less than once a week don't have the same outcomes. The question is, why? Why do people who attend church have better outcomes? And perhaps the answer is, in part, because they tend to have obviously more faith, more resilience, and more reliance upon God than people who don't. They tend to put themselves second and God first. Now, what has this to do with Mark chapter 1? It says in chapter 1, Jesus was in Capernaum and in the synagogue on the Sabbath. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as having authority and not as scribes. And straightway there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, What have we to do with you? Art you come out to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Hold your peace, and come out of him. And the unclean spirit, tearing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. Sort of got the idea for this from a service we were at in Palm Springs, Florida. And it was unusual to hear in a Presbyterian church them talk about demons. It was amazing. Demons, according to the dictionary, defined as an evil spirit, a devil, or a fiend. But it's also an evil passion or inference. It's interesting that Jesus' first sort of association with demons in the Bible comes, one, on a Sabbath, and second, in a synagogue, which indicates that there are obviously demons. There are people with problems in churches. Probably that's because that's where they should be. Amen. But the point is that people who have demons are anything which takes you away from God. Right. A demon is an other God put before God himself. Amen. And it says back in Psalms 106, that people have been sacrificed to demons, and not just in the sense of the usual sacrifices, but in sacrificing because we allow them to come into our lives. We allow them to come into our lives and to take over our lives. Look at Psalm 106, verse 36, 37. But mingled themselves, the people of Israel, and learned their works, and served their idols, which became a snare unto them. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto demons, and shed innocent blood. You go back to Mark, it says when Christ was bringing the demon out, it says, "Are you come to destroy us?" You know, many people don't want their demon-possessed lives to be destroyed. They're more comfortable with their demons. And this is why it's sometimes so difficult to get people to change. Yes. Because they're so comfortable in their life that they're in, even though they actually hate it. So there are demons. There are demons of all sorts around. Some people say, if people knew what was sitting in the same building with them, they'd be terrified. And maybe that's true. There may be all sorts of creatures we can't see right in this room. But that's one. The demons are one. If you have a strong walk with Christ, you're not going to be serving demons the same way you would be otherwise. When Jesus left the synagogue, he went to the house of Simon. And Simon's mother-in-law was sick with a fever. Now, it says in verse 30, Mark 1, verse 30, "Now Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and straightway they tell him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and raised her up, and the fever left her." Now, in this modern world, we have all reasons, all sorts of knowledge about what causes fever. We know it's caused by viruses, by bacteria, by changes in the body's immune system, by et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't really understand all that causes fever. Go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, way back in the Old Testament, and verse 22. It says back in verse 15, "But it shall come to pass, if people do not hearken unto the voice of Jehovah, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, then these curses will come upon you." In verse 22, "Jehovah will smite you with consumption, and with fever, and with inflammation, and with fiery heat, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue you until you perish. Thy heaven will be as brass, and the earth will be as iron. Jehovah will make the rain of your land powder, and dust from heaven shall come down upon you." Look at Leviticus 26. Leviticus is the book of the law in the Bible, which we don't really pay too much attention to as we should. Leviticus 26, starting at verse 14. "But if you will not hearken unto me, and will not do all these commandments, And if you shall reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors mine ordinances, so that you will not do all my commandments, but break my covenant, I also will do this unto you. I will appoint terror over you, even consumption and fever, that shall consume the eyes, make your soul pine away. You shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. Fever, in the biblical sense, is often a message or admonition to the curse of demons. And it happened that after Christ cast out the demons in the synagogue, he was still on the Sabbath. Now he cast demons out of the mother-in-law of one of his disciples. See, we all have people in our family who have demons, and we can't get away from it until God takes over. The third thing I wanted to point out was the fact that after he raised up, or took the fever from Simon's mother-in-law, she left, or the fever left her, and she ministered unto them. Amen. Straightway, when the demons leave people, they start to minister. Right. The Greek word that's used for minister or for service in this is the same word that's used for deacon as it applies to the church. So she ministered to them as a deacon would in a church. This is at a time when women were not much in churches, were not really held in high esteem. But here is Christ relieving a woman of her fever, and then she ministered to them. You see, that's what we have to do. Look for people everywhere, in churches, out of churches, who have demons. Help relieve them, and then they will minister back to us. Amen. And that really is something we should all think about.